Great. So thanks everyone again for joining. We're going to be talking about universal design for learning and access for all learners this afternoon. So my name is Shelby Kapler. I work with the Wyoming Institute for Disabilities, and more specifically with the Wyoming Assistive Technology Resources, and I coordinate our Wyoming Accessible Educational Materials Clearinghouse. I can be reached at 307-766-5770 or skapple1@uwyo.edu. So with that, we will jump right in. So the definition of universal design for learning, it's kind of a broad definition and it's really hard to pinpoint. So I'm hoping to give you kind of an overview and better understanding of what UDL is. So basically, it is a framework that helps with the development of flexible learning environments in order to accommodate all learners. So this did originate from the universal design as far as in the environmental capacity. So designing spaces that are equal for everyone to be able to participate in and access. So universal design for learning is based off of that principle. The idea is to provide all students with access to an equal opportunity to succeed. So the Universal Design for Learning guidelines are divided into three separate principles. This includes multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. So these are concrete suggestions. So none of these have to be taken very specifically. You can take them and use them as you are able or as you see fit. So they're just suggestions. So why universal design for learning? Basically, we want every student to be able to participate in meaningful and challenging learning opportunities. UDL allows for greater flexibility in learning and also reduces barriers to learning. UDL can honor learner variability, and the developers of the UDL guidelines state that there is no average learner. Every student is different and is an individual and should be recognized as such. The UDL principles also try to shift the idea that learning differences and learning deficiencies lie in the student, where oftentimes it is within the environment or how information is presented that can cause problems at times. So this is one of my favorite graphics. If you've seen this before, you'll recognize that it's showing differences between equal, equitable, and finally universal design solutions. And then this can be applied to the universal design for learning principles as well. So there are three boys of varying heights trying to see over a wooden fence to a baseball game. So in the first frame, every student has one box to stand on. So it's an equal solution where every boy has the same accommodation, but it shows that the shortest boy is still not able to see over that fence. So it's not the greatest solution. In the second frame, the boys have an equitable solution where not all of them are standing on a box. The tallest boy doesn't need one, and the shortest boy needs two boxes to stand on, and they are all at the same height and able to see over that wooden fence. However, the third frame shows that the barrier, the wooden fence, has been taken away and replaced with a chain link fence. So all the boys are able to see through that chain link fence and enjoy the game without having to have accommodations or boxes to stand on at all. So there are three core principles of universal design for learning, as I mentioned. The first is multiple means of engagement. And so this is where we're trying to get students involved and motivated to learn, figuring out kind of what motivates them and how to get them engaged with the content. Also talks a bit about self-regulation and developing enthusiasm for learning. Multiple means of representation discusses how content is presented within the learning environment. And lastly, the multiple means of action and expression is how students can show what they've learned and demonstrate their knowledge through various means. So if you were to go to the Universal Design for Learning website, you would see this infographic. So it divides up the three core principles into three columns. So the first column is engagement, the second is representation, and the third is action and expression. And then along the left-hand side, it's divided into three rows. So the first row being access, the second is support, and the third is executive function. So we're going to dive a little deeper into each of these 9 areas and get a better understanding of what UDL is. So the first, multiple means of engagement. Like I talked about, this is how we engage a student. So what sparks a learner's motivation and enthusiasm for learning? Um, Recognizing that students have multiple and intersecting identities, and that these identities influence their interests and engagement with learning. Learners should feel comfortable bringing their authentic selves to the classroom and then being able to find connections to their authentic selves in what they're learning. Um, Also recognizing that every learner has different preferences for learning. This may be more individual work versus group work, or they might prefer routine versus spontaneity, but also recognizing that these can change based on context. So if this student regularly prefers routine, maybe they like spontaneity in a different context. And these preferences can change day to day, week to week, sometimes even hour by hour. So diving in a little bit deeper, access related to engagement. So we want to design options for welcoming interests and identities, optimizing choice and autonomy, letting the student pick some of their activities, ensuring that those activities are relevant, valuable, and authentic, and optimizing those activities for each student. Social and cultural backgrounds are going to influence how a student engages with the content, and also ensuring that the content is both age and ability appropriate for each student. We want to ensure that we are nurturing joy and play. I'm sure that many of us know how important play is, both for learning and general development. So trying to make a very welcoming and playful environment as well. We want to create spaces for learners to be able to explore and discover, while also addressing biases, threats, and distractions that may be present. Um, Engagement, so the support row, talks about designing options for sustaining effort and persistence. So this is where we want to help clarify the meaning and the purpose of goals so that students are aware of what they're working toward and why. Optimizing challenge and support, and also fostering collaboration. So not only are we focused on the individual student and their identities, but also focusing on working together, interdependence, and collaborative learning. We want to ensure that those students feel like they belong and can develop a community. And then action-oriented feedback is also helpful for many learners. This is also where we want to allow room for, as well as acceptance of mistakes, because we all make them. And the last section, executive function within engagement, um, talks about design options for emotional capacity. So thinking about things like recognizing expectations, beliefs, and motivation, helping students to have an awareness of self and others. And in this way, they can work to reflect individually and on collective learning, and to develop empathy as well as restorative practices. Multiple means of representation. So this is how we present the content and share it with the students. So once we've got the students engaged and we're optimizing those engagement learning practices, now we can start to focus on how information is presented. We all know that everybody learns and makes meaning of information differently. Um, so our backgrounds and experiences are going to influence how we perceive and approach information. Someone with a sensory disability, like a visual impairment or hearing impairment, is going to perceive information very differently from each other. As with students with learning disabilities, sometimes how information is comprehended changes, as well as those from non-dominant cultures. So we're not only speaking about disability here, but we're also speaking about every identity with every student. I think it's also important here to recognize just the simple learning styles. Some people think more logically, some think in examples, some think a lot more artistically. So being sure to present material in a variety of ways in order that students can best understand that content. So when talking about access within representation, it talks about designing options for perception. So a lot of what we just talked about, we want to support opportunities to customize the display of information. We want to support multiple ways to perceive information and to represent a diversity of perspectives and identities in authentic ways. So I was on a webinar with the developers of the UDL framework, and they talked about a common way that scientists or doctors are presented are commonly in white lab coats. So the top picture toward the left and on this slide presents a white male doctor in a lab coat with a stethoscope. And this is often how doctors are depicted. However, on the bottom, there is a woman in a white or in a pink shirt with a stethoscope around her neck and sitting at a desk, which indicates that she's a doctor. And it shows her differently, so she's not wearing that standard lab coat, and it is a woman. Lastly, on the upper right-hand side is a male doctor, but he's not white, and he is wearing a lab coat, but he's also sitting in a wheelchair. So being sure to show that not all doctors are represented in white lab coats. They may come across differently, they may be seen differently, and this can also help students to understand that, you know, they may be able to pursue some of these career choices or career options that they wouldn't have thought that they would normally fit into. Talking about support within representation, design options for language and symbols. So presenting information in language and symbols, we want to ensure that all of that vocabulary, those symbols, and language structures that are being used are clear. Supporting the decoding of text as well as mathematical notation and other symbols. So on the right-hand side of this slide, I have an image of an app called MyDYS or MyDys, like dyslexia. And this is a really cool app because it does highlight letters that are commonly mixed up for students with dyslexia. And those letters or letter combinations can be customized based on the student's need or maybe what vowel sound or combination they're learning. So that's a great way to help support students with decoding. We also want to cultivate understanding and respect across languages and dialects, address biases in the use of language and symbols, as well as illustrate through multiple media, like we've talked about. And finally, executive function within representation. We want to design options for building knowledge. So this is where we can help students to connect previous learning to what they're learning currently, where students can highlight and explore patterns, cultural or critical features, big ideas and relationships between concepts, um, highlighting multiple ways of knowing and making meaning, and then maximizing transfer and generalization. So again, in this image, various breeds of dogs are generalized into one standard image of a dog. So finally, moving on to multiple means of action and expression. So just like everyone learns and perceives information differerently, all students are going to express themselves differently and show how they know in different ways. Learners may feel more comfortable expressing their knowledge in one way or another. So I've got an image here of a student who's very nervous with a microphone in her hand. So for example, if you have a student who's very nervous about speaking in front of the class, maybe that's not the best way for that student to share what they've learned. Or conversely, if you've got a student who is very participatory in class and shares a lot, and you can tell that they understand what they've learned, but then they do very poorly on a written exam. This is where it might be time to start thinking about providing a different outlet for students to show what they know. So it could be written text, speech, artistic expression, lots of different ways. So our action and expression requires strategy, practice, and organization. So a few ideas here for action and expression. Design options for interaction. So vary and honor the methods for response, navigation, and movement. So at the top of this slide, I have pictures of various seating options that could be used in a classroom. Everything from stools to wobble stools to yoga balls, beanbag chairs, even like slant boards or clipboards. So this kind of does intertwine back with engagement. And you'll see that a lot of these principles do kind of weave together and work together. And then also optimizing access to accessible materials and assistive and accessible technologies and tools. So providing access maybe to a computer and a mouse or pen and paper, but also considering that those may not be the best way for students to show what they know. Maybe putting together a puppet show is going to be better for a student to display what they know. And also integrating various assistive technologies. So on the right-hand side of this image on the bottom, I have a screenshot of a software program, which is an assistive technology. It's got various features like prediction or predictive text, hover speech, dictionaries, things along those lines. So providing various ways for students to interact with and be supported by assistive technologies. Action and expression, our support section. We talk about designing options for expression and communication. So kind of a lot of what we've just talked about, using multiple means of media for communication, using multiple tools for communication, composition, and creativity. So yeah, designing really creative uh, assignments and ways to interact with different materials. We want to help students build fluencies with graduated support for practice and performance. And again, addressing biases that might be related to modes of expression and communication. Lastly, executive functioning within action and expression. We want to design options for strategy development. So this is where we help students to set and understand meaningful goals, helping the students to anticipate and plan for challenges, organizing information and resources, enhancing capacity for maintaining progress, and also challenging exclusionary practices. So really focusing on those goals, how to get to them, and how to overcome any challenges that might be encountered on the way. So wrapping this up, some of the key takeaways. Again, the UDL does guidelines are a set of suggestions. There's a lot of different ways that they can be utilized and implemented. These are not intended to be used as a checklist. These are guidelines and considerations. And with that, there is no one means of implementing UDL that's going to suit every student in every situation. So be sure to kind of mix it up and ensure that you're trying to meet every student where possible. But that is one of the big principles and kind of overarching ideas behind UDL is that it is an approachable practice for every student. So that wraps up this training. Our next training is going to be on Tuesday, November 19th at 3:30 p.m. right here on Zoom. And we'll be discussing creating accessible documents, specifically looking at Word, PowerPoint, and Excel documents. If you're interested in a certificate of participation or certificate of attendance for this session, please reach out. And this recorded session will be posted on our AIM website as soon as we can get the video downloaded and edited. So that's uwyo.edu/wind/AIM AEM.